It's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I talked about how to cope when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to share with you having a loved one critically ill in intensive care. Counterintuitive strategies that work. Before I get into today's topic, I want to share a quote with you that I wrote on today's topic. And the quote says, "Most people in society have been brought up to respect authority and to listen to experts. While this may be true, accurate, and good for you and your family if the experts have your best interest at heart, it's certainly not true and accurate if experts don't have your best interest at heart and if they fail to empathize with you and your family on a deep emotional level." One of the biggest complaints families in intensive care have is that they don't feel understood, that intensive care teams don't listen, and that it's all negative and doom and gloom. Intensive care is a very dynamic and volatile environment, and expert advice can be hard to come by, especially if intensive care units have to manage financial budgets, their precious and in-demand beds, staff, and other precious resources. Therefore, any expert advice in this context needs to be taken with a grain of salt. With intensive care being a multi-billion-dollar per year industry, and with the stakes being extremely high on both ends, the critically ill patient's family and intensive care teams have much to lose. The fact of the matter is that if you and your family listen to the quote-unquote expert advice of intensive care teams, you need to listen carefully and you need to read between the lines. Fail to do any of this and you and your family will be doomed. Once you have understood the meaning of the things that have been said and also of the things that have not been said, you need to then look at strategies and resources that will enable you to get what you want, need, and deserve. When your loved one is critically ill in intensive care during this once-in-a-lifetime situation that you can't afford to be getting wrong. This includes applying some counterintuitive strategies, and it includes moving away from what 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care are doing, and as a result make no informed decisions, have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence. Go against the grain, challenge the intensive care team, do your own research, seek counsel, consulting, and advice from people who have insider knowledge, and you will see results very quickly by moving closer towards the outcomes you and your family want, need, and deserve. So, let's get into today's topic. Most families in intensive care, and I go as far to say that 99% of families in intensive care make no informed decisions. They have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence. They, quote unquote, suck up to the intensive care team, and they are intimidated by their perceived power and their perceived authority. I can see this in their body language and I can hear it in their tone of voice. One of the biggest complaints that families in intensive care have is that they feel pressured and that they feel that they have no choice or options. That's the belief system of 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care, and it's a belief system that doesn't serve them. In fact, it's a belief system that could be deadly, quite literally. The reality and the fact of the matter is that you do have choice, you have options, and you can influence decision making fast once you start doing your own research, once you question everything the intensive care team is telling you, and once you start changing your belief system. You also need to look for the things the intensive care team isn't telling you, and there's plenty of crucial information they are withholding from you. Changing your belief system is difficult, especially if you have a limiting belief system, but it's achievable and it's the most important thing you can do when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. This is particularly important if your loved one is either very unstable and in a very critical condition, or is in a life-threatening situation, or is not waking up after an induced coma, or is in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, including long-term ventilation, or your loved one may be having a severe or traumatic head or brain injury, or your loved one may be threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order. Or your loved one may be in a situation where the intensive care team suggests that a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment might be, quote unquote, in the best interest for your critically ill loved one. Or your loved one may even be approaching their end of life in intensive care. And because those situations are high stakes situations, you can't afford to be getting them wrong. And after nearly 20 years intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, where I literally worked with thousands of critically ill patients and their families, I have seen over and over again that the only way to dramatically increase chances that your loved one is getting the best chances for best treatment and recovery is simply that you ask better questions, that you do your own research, and that you seek external, tailor-made and independent counsel, consulting advice and advocacy like you get here at intensivecarehotline.com. I have also worked as a nurse unit manager for over 5 years in intensive care, and given that I now talk to families in intensive care every day all over the world in my counseling, consulting and advocacy practice at intensivecarehotline.com, I have intimate insider knowledge about the subject, and I therefore have a very good understanding in how you feel. The only way to fight the negativity, the doom and gloom of the intensive care team, and the only way to get what you and your family want, need and deserve is to ask better questions and get informed about intensive care. This includes researching treatment options, and it also includes how you communicate with the intensive care team. Your communication style is extremely important. For example, many families in intensive care come to us at intensivecarehotline.com when it's either too late, which means after they have lost a loved one, or they come to us when they feel under immense pressure from intensive care teams. This pressure often comes when families are being asked for family meetings in intensive care. For example, families are reporting that they have been asked to come to a family meeting and they follow blindly. If you had worked in intensive care for nearly 20 years like I have, you would know that family meetings in intensive care are the ultimate display of perceived power and perceived authority of the intensive care team. Those family meetings are set up to intimidate you, and they are set up to deliver bad news. Intensive care teams are running those family meetings 7 days a week, 365 days per year, and they have designed those meetings to make it a win for them. Intensive care teams are all about managing their beds, their finances, their often multi-million-dollar per year medical research interests, as well as their staff. I need to say this again because this is so important. Intensive care teams are all about managing their beds, their finances, their multi-million-dollar per year medical research interests, as well as their staff. You and your family are looking for a solution for your critically ill loved one. The intensive care team is looking for a solution for their intensive care unit. It's as simple as that. Fail to recognize any of the things that I just mentioned, and you and your family are going to be doomed. There is a clear conflict of interest between the intensive care team and families in intensive care, especially if it comes to the difficult and challenging situations that I mentioned before. In order to get the outcomes that you want, need, and deserve for your critically ill loved one in intensive care, you need to change, adapt, and ask better questions very quickly. You need to stop doing what 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care are doing, and you need to stop sucking up to the intensive care team, and you need to stop feeling intimidated by the intensive care team. You need to start going against the grain, and you need to start asking better questions, and you need to start challenging the intensive care team on every level. You may have heard of the analogy of the frog in boiling water. If you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, he'll jump right out of the pot to save his life. Put a frog in a pot of cold water and start heating the pot. The frog won't recognize that he's basically boiling to death. Most families in intensive care fail to recognize what the intensive care team is doing. Most of the things they are doing is quote unquote framed as being quote unquote in the best interest for your critically ill loved one. The fact of the matter is that whenever the intensive care team says it's quote unquote in the best interest for your critically ill loved one, it's most likely in the best interest for their intensive care unit. One of the biggest skills you can learn during this once-in-a-lifetime situation is to position your critically ill loved one's diagnosis, prognosis, as well as their care and their treatment in a light that increases the chances to get the best care and treatment there is. I can help you with that. Don't delay and start acting now. Don't become another casualty of the intensive care team and start doing your own research now and get help now. We have too many families coming to us who only find out about our service when it's too late and their loved one has died. So, how can you become the best advocate for your critically ill loved one? Make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence quickly whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You get to that all-important feeling of making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, real power, and real control, and how you can influence decision-making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle, and vulnerability, even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 mind-blowing tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind the scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again next week in another update. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section, where I answer your questions, or simply send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Or you can call me, find international phone numbers on our Contacts tab. Also, check out our ebook section, where you get more ebooks, videos and audio recordings, and where you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me via Skype, over the phone and via email by clicking on the email and phone counseling tabs on the top of the website. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.